Get business credit with these 5 rules of banking. I have a doozy of a training for us just because we have 5 banking rules that if you were a client of ours and I was sitting in front of you right now, I want to give you some low hanging fruit that you could essentially take to the bank, no pun intended, and optimize, really optimize and maximize. I actually like both those words. Optimize and maximize the amount of capital that you get. And so let's dive right into the 5 rules. I want to first start off with the number one rule at the top, which is find the biggest levers and use them. Now, there's a couple of different levers, again, that you can pull from, but I wanted to condense this into 2 main levers that I think applies to just about everyone listening to the sound of my voice. Now, this is case by case. And so, again, depending on where you were coming in at, if you were someone who was 10 years into business, I would be working with you on your file totally different from someone who was 10 days in. 2 totally different roadmaps. But I think that number one, when it comes to finding the lever, the banking partnership is something that we should all have in place. Now, let's define business partnerships, right? Let's define banking partnerships, I should say. Notice that I said banking partnerships, and notice that on here it says banking partnerships and not business banking partnerships. And the reason why that's there, it's not a typo. The reason why it's there is because 99% of us should have an account somewhere, right? This is about getting you with your first win. We're not looking to make $1 million out of the gate. This is a quick win that we're looking for. It's like when you are working out, it's not about putting on 25 pounds of muscle off the rip. It's not about running a 4.4 on a 40-yard dash. It's, hey, can I hang myself on the pull-up bar for at least 10 seconds? Hey, can I at least get 5,000 steps in today? I'm going from 1,000 steps to 5,000 steps. That's all we're doing here. And so a banking partnership is something as simple as, do I have a debit card with preferably, I'm going to put context around this, I'm going to put guardrails for you, preferably a bank. So this can be a T or A bank. This can be a regional bank, or this can be a credit union. I don't want you to misconstrue this with Chime. I don't want you to misconstrue this with some of these fintech companies. I'm talking about a legitimate bank. The reason why this is going to be important is because if you have something as simple as a debit card, a basic credit card, even just a personal checking account, that creates a data point and that creates a form of trust with that bank, which then translates to a partnership that you have with them. You can even do this with a merchant account if maybe you're a bit more seasoned and you already have, again, cash flow coming in through your business and through that entity. So the second lever that you can look at within, again, the first lever is going to be utilizing liquidity, the age of the accounts, or the age of the business and the accounts of the business. So I'm actually going to put 2 things on there, the age of the business and the age of the accounts. So this piece right here may be a little bit more for my seasoned vets. And the reason why I want to speak to both of you today, which is the starters and the seasoned vets, is because I think the statistic right now for our channel is 70% of us have an existing business. The other 30% are complete startups. And so the first piece applies to all of us with banking partnerships. But the second piece to the first lever, which is, again, finding the banks that you already have an account with, is utilizing liquidity, which means if you have $10,000 with that account, then your bank rating is going to be significantly better with them compared to if you just open an account and you have $50 in there. I'm calling a spade, especially with how the climate is right now with liquidity and what banks want to see. Having access to more capital or having that capital more readily accessible inside of that account is going to make your profile stand out, especially as you start to go back in to get access to some working capital with them. The age of the business is going to be a key player, and also the age of the account. There's essentially two dates that banks are looking at. And when I say banks, financial institutions, credit unions, I'm going to use them essentially as kind of like one interchangeably in this video. Is they're going to be looking at the age of the business. So let's say you established your company. Let's say it's an LLC for simplicity's sake in April of 2020, and you but you open the account with them on March 2024. There's 2 dates that they're going to be weighing, right? What you have working for you is the dates that you opened the business. It's going on 4 years now. What you kind of have working against you if you try to go in cold turkey a little too quickly is that account is under 6 months old. Again, at the time of this recording, we're recording this in the middle of July. And so if you try to go in with them a little too quickly, usually under 90 days, I say 6 months is a little fast. That's where you see them give you, weak, low ball numbers. Sometimes they don't even offer you the top line creme la creme or creme la crop type of products, which is the business lines of credit, which is fleet financing, equipment financing. That's what you want to get to. Now, if you're talking about business credit cards, that's also hit or miss. I know that some banks, they're starting off with lower limits like 3K, and then they're bumping people up once they see an organic use of it, up to 25, 30, 35K per line. But that's not every bank. But what does apply to every bank and every financial institution is those 3 key factors right there. The liquidity, that's a big player, especially in this current market, the age of the business, and also the age of the account. Now, the second banking rule that I honestly don't see enough people talking about, and I want to shed light on it because it's one of the things that we've been seeing move the needle for our clients, probably, if not the most, it's definitely up there, which is why it's number 2 on the list. And that's going to be lending appetite. Now, banks have this thing where they call it a lending appetite. Others call it portfolio strength or the strength of the portfolio. Here's what that means. Every bank and every underwriter, they're going to gravitate towards specific industries. Far too often I see when a client comes in, they are so focused on, hey, what's the industry that I have to be in? Like, just give me the NAICS code, right? And I think I'm good to go. Or even on YouTube, hey, what are the best banks for my business? What are the best banks? What are the best banks? You can have the list of the best banks. You can have the list of the best industry codes, quote unquote, low industry codes, right? It's kind of like it's catchy. That's what it's known as. And industry codes, NAICS codes, NAICS codes, SIC codes, all the same thing, essentially. If you have a business that's properly structured, your credit profile is on point, and you go and you take that low risk industry, you take it to a bank that doesn't have an appetite for it, meaning it's not appealing to them, you're going to get denied for capital, or they're not going to touch your file, even with the 6-foot pole. Let's flip that scenario around. Let's say that you go in to the right bank, but it isn't structured properly. Then at that point, you took it to the right place, but you just took it at the wrong time. But the focal point of the lending appetite, and the reason why I have it here as a big lever, and it's really one of the most optimal levers, is because you can have a business that may not necessarily fit the status quo of it being, quote unquote, a low risk industry. I'll give you context around that. Real estate tends to be one of those. But if you take it to the right financial institution where their portfolio is primarily made up of real estate investing, land developing, fix and flipping, long-term holds, regardless of whether it's a high risk in terms of the overall setup, that bank and that financial institution is going to say, that fits our criteria. That fits what we're looking for. This is why knowing the lending appetite of the financial institution that you're going to, knowing, hey, this is a fantastic question that I like to train my clients to ask. Hey, what does the majority of your lending portfolio consist of? You'll be able to know if they say, hey, 30% of it is real estate, 40% of it is e-commerce, and that leaves us with what, 30%? The other 30% is going to be retail, as an example. That's going to shift. And that also shifts by where the economy is as a whole. Number one, on a macro level. Number two, in a micro level, that also shifts of how an industry within the economy looks. I'm going to give you a real world example that we see. The same time last year, I would have told you trucking was a fairly easy business to get credit for, right? It was fairly easy to scale. Right now, that's becoming harder and harder. The reason for that is because banks are having a really tough time getting their investment back, which is the capital that they've essentially given trucking companies, right? And that's because the industry as a whole has taken a hit. Even though the economy, there's maybe other industries that aren't hurting as bad. That means that banks now shift their attention to where are we going to see a return on capital the fastest and the most in the most secure way. If that's not happening, and again, I'm going to use the example of trucking just because it's one that we tend to see quite a bit. If that's not happening with trucking, one of two things is going to happen. We're going to actually one of three things. Number one, we're going to have these companies, these business owners jump through far more hoops, which means that your business has to be far more dialed in. That's when you start getting things like, hey, we want to see at least 2-3 years of financial tax returns. That's number one. Number two is you start getting a far lower amount approved than what you maybe would have the same time last year. So if you would have maybe gotten 250K, maybe that dips down to like 75K if you're lucky. And then the third piece is you just get denied altogether. Like they just say, no, we're not touching the file. And so that's why you want to pay attention to what's the not just the lending appetite as a whole, but what's the lending appetite in the current state of where we're at in this quarter, which is one of the things that we like to focus on with clients all the time. We're constantly looking at data. Number three is multiple business funding sources is good. This is a good thing. Big banks, local banks, credit unions. I like to have our clients diversify. Now, we don't like to do it all at once because we like to squeeze as much juice from the from the fruit as we can. Using that example, using that analogy, we like to squeeze as much as we can from, let's say, the first bank. We like to squeeze as much as we can from the second bank. Then let's go ahead and see what a credit union looks like for us, as we're setting ourselves up for a second, third, fourth, fifth round of business funding. This is going to reduce what's called a credit exposure on a specific lending institution. Now, if you have no idea what a total credit exposure is, this means that if I take my S Corp right now to, let's say, I'll use the example Bank of America, as just we all know who Bank of America is, right? And their total credit exposure for, let's say, a business is $250,000 before they start to have me jump through a ton of hoops, like tax returns, tax transcripts, profit and loss statements, personal financial statements. And then they also, up to that 250, I could maybe get away with having a 720, 730 credit score. Once I start to inch my way up into that total credit exposure, I most likely have to have some A1 credit. Not saying that you should never aim for A1 credit, but you just start having to jump through far more hoops versus up to that 250K. That's when you can typically swing having to maybe just show 1 year of tax returns if you're going for a BLOC. Not always. That's, again, case by case. Or if you're just going for a business credit card, not having to show any financials at all. The third thing that it does is that it creates great variety of credit, both on the personal and on the business side, which is something that I always want our clients to get into the habit of. It's one of the opening conversations that we always have. How many accounts do you have and where are they stationed? You see how this is tying into the first lever that I gave you, which is what banking partnerships do you have? That ties into the third piece, which is, okay, now that we understand where our partnerships are, can we add more partnerships like that? So if I have a Chase and a Wells Fargo, can I add a Bank of America if it makes sense for my business? If I have maybe 2 credit unions in my town that they're just located, let's say in the middle of, I'm in Florida, in Central Florida, can I find a more national or 2 or 3 more national level credit unions? Because this is going to help diversify my funding, essentially, portfolio that I can go back in and tap into. Number 4 is understanding banking and funding limits. Now, this does tie in to the total credit exposure, but I wanted to take it a step further because this is when you're seeking too much capital too quickly. You actually end up hurting yourself from getting access to additional capital in the future. So there's a time and a place for how much you are looking to get. A big mistake that I tend to see, and it's one of the main things that I like to coach our clients on, even just mentally, is, hey, I understand that you may be excited that you want to get access to working capital. But if you want to do this in a way that's predictable, in a way that's scalable, in a way that's healthy, let's go ahead and kind of stair step this, right? Let's not just put this thing on an escalator and just start flying up. It's not about a race, about getting to $300,000 as fast as you can. That happens a lot where you'll see a business get to 300K too quickly, and then the business comes back in, or the bank comes back in, doesn't underwrite and says, this isn't justifiable, and they just end up slashing the limits. Versus when we start scaling it the right way, this is why we have a saying inside of our company that we're constantly, telling our clients, and it's almost like you could wake us out of our sleep and we'll tell you, and that's getting access to funding, getting access to capital isn't an event. It's a constant occurrence. It's a constant plan. And so what happens is, if we're going from 50 to $100,000, the plan needs to change of going from 100 to 150, 150 to a quarter to half a mil, and beyond. So this means that you're going to be able to get products best suited for your business's age, industry, revenue threshold, and the actual use of capital when you understand the funding, banking, and when you understand the banking and funding limits within each given lending institution. And now brings me to my fifth and final point, and that is this: consider a rest and cool down period. Consider a rest and cool down period. What does this mean? This means that if we like to work in rounds, and so if each round on paper is, let's say, or on average, it takes 30 days to go from no capital to $100,000 as, again, a round number worth of business credit, we're not just going to blitz into the second round. We're going to have a rest period to see, okay, where did the capital come from? How much more? Is there a gap? Is there a delta that we need to make up? Or is there a way that we can have a cool down where we can let these accounts season, use some organic spend as we're preparing a second round to go into, and then maybe have a 30-day in between, and then go in on day 60 or on day 90 if we're doing this within a quarter, right? So you have 30 days to get the capital, 30-day rest to assess, and then let's say going into day 90 at the end of that quarter, you're going into your second round of business capital. Let's say for another $150,000, that puts us at a quarter. This is how you're going to scale the business credit, and you're going to be able to do it properly without hurting yourself from having a potential underwrite come in and say there's no justifiable reason of why you need this much capital. We're seeing this more and more, which is why we've taken this approach with clients, because it's holistic, it's safe, and it's sustainable. That's the main thing. If you're in business, you want sustainability. That's how the big players stay in business over a long, long period of time. They have sustainability. Next up, you have the use of capital that you get before you just get it. This means that you are able to articulate what the capital is actually going to be used for and where it's going to be allocated. If that conversation comes up, you want to prepare yourself for it, because if you're you're done. Then at that point, that's when you see limits get slashed in half, because what people do is they'll get access to, again, we'll use the number $100,000 because it's we're it's on brand right now, $100,000 worth of business capital, and then they don't use it and they don't do anything with it for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, and all of a sudden they wake up one day, wait a minute, I had access to $100,000. Why are all of a sudden these accounts getting closed out, or why are these limits getting slashed? You want to have organic spend flowing through those accounts so that the bank sees, okay, there's an actual need for this. And that's where it actually gets cool, because apart from you monitoring, and I have it there, monitor, apart from you monitoring your accounts the way that you should be as a business owner, they're also monitoring it. That's when you start to get offers from financial institutions that aren't regularly what we say marketed, televised, or promoted. And that's when things get fun, because this is where we start helping our clients start picking the best selections for their business, because it's what we call less of a funding craze pool, or less of a funding craze. happening. And while everyone's going in for the easy stuff, the 0% business credit cards, it's almost like you're backdooring it and you're getting access to the stuff that the regular business owner wouldn't necessarily see. And that's where we start to see those big jumps in business capital. And that's where a lot of people kind of get hung up on. But if you follow these 5 rules, you'll be able to work your way into that space. If you are interested in potentially seeing what it would look like to work with our team, we can take a look at your business, where you're at, where you're looking to go. We'll flat out, we have a no BS approach here. We'll flat out let you know, hey, this is what we can do for you. This is what it would look like to work with us. And obviously this is what it would look like to team up. If that sounds like a good fit, cool. Go ahead and book a call down below, insideinnercircle.com. You can book a demo. We'll let you know exactly what that looks like. And if it doesn't, we'll also let you know as well. Again, our whole purpose is what you've been getting on the channel, which is to provide value and leave you far better than how you came in. So again, I appreciate you guys checking me out. Until next time, everyone, I will see you in the next video. Bye.